hat on. I definitely think it's something to remember so we can establish a better run game against the Lions, who
Yeah.
performed really well against Tampa Bay. Would you say that their story in itself is a surprise, or do you think the Lions have played up to their expectation or and are rightfully where they're supposed to be?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think for anyone who is entering a level of greatness, at some point you have to be confident in your own abilities before others are confident in yours, because that's all that matters. I mean, nobody was confident in Brock Purdy until Brock Purdy performed. Which I don't think in 49ers fans, when it came to that both quarterbacks got injured, you're like, oh, we're saved, Brock Purdy, Like, were you thinking that seventh round guy? He dropped in seventh round, right?
Dan, yeah, he was the last pick, seventh round, 262. I can tell you like vividly the conversation Jared, my dad, and I had when we found out that we had lost Trey and Jimmy Garoppolo. When we found out that they were done and we just had Brock Purdy, and he was the last pick in the draft. I'll be completely honest. I thought, oh my god, which free agent are we gonna have to sign? Because I didn't know that he was gonna end up being this good, and I'm okay with saying I was wrong, but I was already looking at like, oh my god, like is a guy like Matt Ryan gonna come out of retirement because he played under the Shanahan offense? At that time, Cam Newton was like barely a free agent, so I'm like, dude, are we gonna have to resort to Cam Newton? Like I was over here playing GM, like who are we gonna call to come out of retirement or come off the bench to help us out? And luckily,
RG3.
imagine. And again, he played the Shanahan offense, so I was like, why not? But I'm happy to say I was wrong, and Brock Purdy proved us wrong, and he's playing out of his mind, and I'm happy he's on the team, and I'm looking forward to how he performs against Detroit. But yeah, in that moment, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't 100% confident at first until we finally got to see him play.
Exactly. And that right there is a testament to his own confidence in his own ability. And I think you got to be crazy to be great. So the Lions, they're over here giving these pre-speeches before the season starts about, you can kick us down, and they sound crazy. But the confidence that he had in that group and in himself and in the people around him, it shows that they really believe what they were saying, because anybody can believe anything, and I'm always going to use Tua because I really despise that nigga. But Tua goes in there and is talking about, oh, I'm only good with Tyreek, oh, like trying to be sarcastic and stuff. It didn't really sound convincing that he believes that he's a top guy. That didn't sound like a confident player, because a confident player wouldn't even acknowledge the noise. The confident player would just go out there and do it. People have been hating Lamar Jackson since he was drafted because he decided for his mom to be his agent. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't understand what's so wrong with that. Maybe it's not necessarily the traditional thing to do. I'm not too aware of his mom's abilities as far as legalese. I can't speak on that. Obviously, I'm sure she's not a lawyer. A lawyer probably does know more legal things than she does, or like, an agent. But hey, he's keeping it in the family. People hated him for 7 years. And what did he do? He went out there and played. So, I mean, you got to be confident in yourself, and then it will reflect whether you truly believe it. So, I do think the Lions deserve to be here. I don't think this was a fluke or an accident, but I also believe that yes, they are confident. This is their confidence, showing. It's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of fairy tale, but they made the fairy tale come true. They made those words in the book. You know what I'm saying? They wrote it. They were the author of their own story, and they spoke themselves into existence and manifested a great season, which I don't think a lot of people were even thinking the Lions were going to make the playoffs this year. Were you?
Yeah, no, actually, I had him penciled in as a divisional, not divisional, wild card. Excuse me.
Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting that they gotten this far, but I don't think this it was far fetched when you really look at what they have offensively. So I mean, it's going to be a good show, I believe, but I do think that the 49ers have this one in the bag. And going to the AFC, what is your take on Mahomes versus Lamar Jackson? MVP versus Super Bowl champ, former Super Bowl champ, previous Super Bowl champ. I feel like it feels like the Chiefs haven't won in a while, but they literally won it last year. What is your take on this classic match that we're about to see?
I mean, you talk about heavyweight fights like Lamar and Patrick Mahomes. It's two elite quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Granted, they're not the only ones on the field, but that's how they're going to market it. And to your point about Patrick Mahomes, and it feels like he hasn't won in a bit, it's because it's the offensive struggles that they had throughout the regular season. But the biggest thing is this isn't the regular season. We're now in the postseason, and this is when the stars come out and they perform. And I have to give credit to the Kansas City Chiefs because against the Bills, they look like the old Kansas City Chiefs. They look like those Chiefs that have been to the Super Bowl, that have been to the AFC Championship countless times. I look forward to it. I think ultimately that's the heavyweight fight that we all want to see, especially given how the Bills versus Chiefs went. And in comparison to how the Niners performed against the Packers, these are valuable games that a Patrick Mahomes or a Lamar Jackson needs in order to perfect their craft and become the best of the best en route to a Super Bowl. And I do believe in the old adage that iron sharpens iron. You want to play the best to prove that you are the best. I look forward to this game. I think it's going to be ultra competitive, just like how the Bills and Chiefs were. And I think I'm going to rock with the Ravens. I think they're a buzzsaw. I can't see anybody beating them with the exception of one team that resides in Santa Clara, but that's me being biased. I think Lamar Jackson is on a mission. I think Lamar Jackson is on a mission to prove that he is that guy because he hasn't really had a signature moment in the playoffs. I think this is his opportunity to finally break through and get to a Super Bowl. Whether he wins or not, that's yet to be seen. But I do think that they're more equipped than a Buffalo Bills to unseat the current reigning and defending Super Bowl champions.
And I would 100% agree with this take. I mean, we've seen that he's just completely, and I like that me and you are both narrative guys because I think the narrative matters. As an athlete myself, and you as, I know that you run on your own and work out on your own as well. There's the mental game of any physical activity is important. It's significant. The narratives to me matter. It's not just the numbers. It's not just what happens on the field. Because if we're just going off numbers, it should have been 100-0 with the 49ers and the Packers. I mean, you guys should have. But we know that didn't happen. And it's the narratives and things that play into how people perform. I believe Lamar Jackson is just tired of everyone speaking on his name, talking about how he can't throw, how he relies on his legs. When we praise other quarterbacks for extending the play, we call it extending the play when it's a Russell Wilson, when it's an Aaron Rodgers, when it's a Josh Allen. And Josh Allen literally today, he looked like a running back. He went out there, his most valuable plays were him running it. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, 100%. You mentioned his size and his poise. How are they going to stop him? Like, I don't blame him either. If I have that gift, that natural God-given talent to run over guys like that, why wouldn't you take advantage of that?
Exactly. And so, but when Lamar Jackson does it, it's, he doesn't have a good arm or he's looking to run. I don't think any quarterback is looking to run. If the play falls down and the pocket collapses, why would he take the sack? Or why would he throw it out of bounds when he can get yards? To me, like you said, he's on a mission. This narrative, it's something bigger than him this time. This time around, he's not just the rookie or he's not just, the scrambling guy. He's the MVP. He's coming to show that I deserve this MVP because I am the absolute best. I think finally he has a great supporting cast. I love how you mentioned earlier that it is going to be Mahomes versus Lamar Jackson. However, there's more people on the field. It's a team game. But, the narrative is these are the two guys. And then finally he has a supporting cast to actually have a complete team around him. So, I mean, I think this is his best chance at a Super Bowl. I have them beating the 49ers, but I feel like it could go either way. But this is his best chance to at least get there. This is his best chance that he's had so far. And I do believe The Chiefs are good. They're veterans, but they do not have the same team. They'll never have that same explosiveness that they had when they had Tyreek Hill and other weapons. So, I mean, uh, the Packers coach said it best. I believe it was the Packers coach in a post-game conference. He said, "We'll never have the same group again," and that is unbelievably true. That they'll never have that same group every year. New guys sign, new guys retire, new guys leave, new guys get traded. Things change. So, I mean, the Chiefs that won it last year are not the Chiefs that won it this year, or trying to win it this year. The Chiefs that won it last year is not the same that had Tyreek. So, um, it's going to be interesting to see how they fare without all of their weapons. And a couple guys got banged up in that Bills game. So it's essentially a healthy Ravens versus an injured Chiefs. So I think this is Lamar Jackson's game to lose, and I have them winning by at least 14.
Really?
Yes.
I don't know about 14. I could if you gave me 7 or 10, okay, but like a 2 touchdown score, I well,
I mean, they struggled with Josh Allen, man. They struggled with containing a guy who, and I'm telling you, I got a lot of respect for Josh Allen, but it looked like he was just it looked like, a lot of the plays, he kind of was overwhelmed with how many routes people were running. And what I mean by is, like, there was a lot of crosses, there was a lot of different coverages that the Chiefs were throwing at him, which is why he felt uncomfortable to throw it to Diggs in that moment. Also, Diggs being unproductive. He ran a lot. And I mean, that was a guy who, ran more than Lamar this year. So imagine, a guy who's actually throwing the ball like Lamar Jackson, throwing as well as he is, getting all these perfect passing ratings. It opens up the field for him to do damage when they couldn't contain a guy who that's pretty much all he was doing this game. So, I mean, if they struggle with the Josh Allen, a Lamar Jackson who's much faster, much more elusive, and has thrown better this year, it's going to be some serious problems.
yeah, no, I think that's a good take in terms of how Josh Allen fares versus like a Lamar Jackson and their play style. Because one thing I will give credit to a Lamar Jackson is these last couple of years he's really presented himself more as not a quarterback that can run, but that a quarterback that if need to he can run. Like he's really been poised in the pocket and really developed himself as a better passer, more of a pass first option rather than okay I'm gonna run out of here and get some yards myself. That discipline that
Yeah.
he has to have that mentality of I'm going to throw the ball. If my reads aren't there, okay, then I'll have to run it. But I will give him credit for that sense of discipline and really establishing his own ability to pass the ball rather than run it the way he has. Because I agree with you. There has been a level of disrespect with him that he's just known for scrambling. Well, he's not. Not anymore, at least. He's really developed his game, matured his game, and I think ultimately this game is going to come down to the offenses. We saw how Kansas City was able to produce these points in dire drives where they had to compete with Buffalo. I just don't think it's going to be enough to combat with the Ravens. The way that their offense is firing right now on all cylinders, and the offensive weaponry that they're working with, especially with a guy like Likely, who is having a great season. And on top of that, Mark Andrews is coming back. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure if he's coming back for this game, but he's been in practice. He's been projected to come back at point in this playoffs. Now, whether he presents himself as a big time player, that's yet to be seen. But having reinforcements like a Mark Andrews will only bode well for the Baltimore Ravens, which again, I agree with you. I think they're going to win. 14 points I thought was a lot, but given how they've performed against like the Houston Texans and how you mentioned the Chiefs struggled with the Bills, maybe it's not too much of a far-fetched idea.
And I'll put it like this, Jose. Who would you rather see in the Super Bowl? Would you rather see the Ravens? Like what for the 49ers' sake, would you rather see the Ravens or would you rather see the Chiefs?
That's an interesting point because I talked about this with Jared that I'm not going to look past the Lions. I'm going to give them their respect. But let's say let's
I'm looking past the
no,
Lions.
I'm not going to do that because I'm not falling into that game. I'll give them their respect. Like you said, they're here for a reason. But let's say we get past Detroit, which I think we can. no matter who wins the AFC Championship, it's a revenge game for the Niners for the Super Bowl in Super Bowl 47 or Super Bowl 54 because both of those teams have beaten the Niners. Granted, to answer your question, I want to see a little bit of new blood. I'll go with Lamar, especially because of how the Christmas game went down. I feel like we're able to adjust and prepare for what we've seen against them. And given that we've played them, I would like to see the Ravens because I don't want to see Mahomes and Taylor Swift and all of that in the Super Bowl. I'm okay with that.
You don't want to see Jason Kelsey with the shirt off in the press box?
I would much prefer to see Jason Kelsey in the press box rather than a Taylor Swift.
So I take it you're not a Swiftie then.
I am not. I'm not. And it's like I'm not disparaging people who like her. That's fine. That's your prerogative. But I don't see it. I really don't. That's a lie. You know what one of my favorite songs of hers is? Bad Blood, only because Kendrick Lamar is in it. Like that's literally the only song I can honestly say I've listened to the whole way is because Kendrick Lamar is on it.
Well, can you complete this lyric? I wear t-shirts.
Okay, that's not fair. Everyone knows that one.
See, you might be a Swiftie.
No, that's not the same thing. That's not the same thing. They play that song all the time, and I said I haven't heard the whole song, but I mean, yeah, like we've heard that line.
Hey, is that a classic? I think that's a classic, man. I'm gonna go down on the record. That is a Swiftie classic.
I mean, if you're a Swiftie, I guess. I mean,
well, I mean, I'm just saying. Hey, we say we're not Swifties, but what do you know what the other person is wearing in this lyric?
Yes.
Okay, then you might be a Swiftie.
She's captain, and I'm on the bleachers.
Maybe... No, but to your point, I do want to see Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens versus the Niners in the Super Bowl. However, I think for you guys' sake, you would rather see the Ravens because you see the Chiefs. The Chiefs are too comfortable with being in the Super Bowl. Yeah. I mean, I'm just talking about from a competitive standpoint. Like, you guys obviously have the confidence that you want to beat anyone. But I want to play the least experienced person. Mm-hmm. Lamar Jackson, and to me, not to his fault, because we talk about bad organizations. The Ravens have always historically had, like, horrible receiving cores. It's just, like, always been a defensive-minded success. With that being said, he hasn't had any playoff success. So him getting to the Super Bowl would be a first. Whereas the 49ers have been there before. These guys are used to having that chip on their shoulder that we're going to the Super Bowl. With the Chiefs would also have that same mindset, and they've beaten you guys. So it's like that being they would just be too comfortable to where, as a 49ers fan, I would rather see, let me get the rookie here, which Lamar Jackson isn't a rookie, but he would be a rookie in the Super Bowl position. Let me get the rookie. Let me get the inexperienced young team. Let me get the first-timers. I don't want the people that beat us, because you said, the Ravens beat you, but it wasn't the same Ravens. We're talking about basically a decade ago. Yeah. So, I mean, I'd rather not see, they just broke Brady and Gronk's record. So they're on a roll here. They got the rhythm. Travis Kelce and Mahomes have now the most connecting touchdowns in history. They actually passed your guys too, Joe Montana and Jerry Rice.
I know.
So, I mean, that's just me. Do you agree with that?
No, I think that's a valid point. Selfishly, I part of me would want to see the Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, just because, as you mentioned, that incarnation of the team beat us. Like you said, the Ravens, it was a different team. It was a decade ago. But you can't discount the importance of experience. And like you said, for a guy like Lamar Jackson, who has yet to lose his Super Bowl virginity, he hasn't been there. So that's a valid point. I would rather much take the inexperienced team. But to that point, you could even argue they're hungrier than the Chiefs. Do you want to face a more desperate team, or a team that maybe can become a little bit more lackadaisical because they've been there, they've done that? I think it can go either way.
That's a valid point. Yeah, I mean, with these narratives, you can go, over and over for different things. But I mean, they showed today where they could have been lackadaisical because they're a team who's been there before.
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes has beat Josh Allen before. This isn't something new to him, but they show that you could tell there's just the difference in just being there, being in the moment, and seizing the moment. Patrick Mahomes was ready. You know what I mean? He
Mm.
was ready for the moment. They marched down the field at will. Travis Kelce had a slow. Now that's something concerning that we need to talk about. Travis Kelce has these slow ass starts to the game where it's like the first quarter he's non-existent. He doesn't establish his game, and that's why I believe it'll be a 14-point lead by the Ravens because shit, if he doesn't already if he's not in the game by then, I believe he's just going to keep going. Like I believe that Lamar Jackson is going to keep putting points on the board while Travis Kelce is trying to establish his first touchdown of the game. And that can't happen because other than Pacheco, who does Mahomes have?
Yeah. No. Valid. Valid. And I think that's another testament to how their offensive struggles have been a focal point of the NFL, and the NFL's storyline throughout the season is there's that lack of productivity on the offensive side. I think they sorely miss a guy like Tyreek Hill, who certainly opened up the field, by a wide margin. You could argue. Not even think it's an argument. That he was like their best player. Even if they had Travis Kelce, the level of impact that Hill had by opening up the field, you could throw a bomb to him on any drive, and he's running away with it. And so when you're
Yep.
sorely missing someone like that, when your best players are Kelsey and a Pacheco, and other than that, it's like who else is there?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. And I agree. I agree with that. I agree that Tyreek definitely opened up the field for Travis, kind of made him a better player than what he, I don't want to say actually is, but definitely helped him be in single coverage. But now with him not being in single coverage, we've just seen he has these slow starts. I'm like, man, like, he's in all these commercials and all these people's Mount Rushmores and I mean,
you could even
dude,
argue. You can even argue that after the departure of a Tyreek Hill, Kelsey hasn't really had the same productivity because, like you said, it doesn't open up as much. Now defenses are able to hone in on a Kelsey more so.
yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think, man, as we also, what is your take on? I've always thought about this. What is your take on players having podcasts? I mean, especially postseason. What is your take on that? Is it a bad, like, positive thing, or do you have a negative kind of outlook on that? Like, to me, I think players should be 100% locked in.
Yeah.
I think Travis Kelce has so much noise around him, which is why I think I'm very critical of him. Obviously, we talked about the Swiftie Nation. I mean, they showed Taylor Swift in the Bills game like 30 times, and it was the same cut of her smiling. Like, it wasn't even anything new. She was just smiling and looking out of the window. But, I mean, there's so much noise around Travis Kelce on and off the field. And then, of course, he has the podcast with his brother. Do you think that he's getting away from the simple fact that he's playing the game of football?
I that's a really interesting point because I can speak as a Niner fan. We have Fred Warner has his own podcast as well, and I think it just depends on how they approach it. I look at it this way: Fred Warner, when he has his podcast, he keeps it in house. He talks about himself. He talks about the Niners and how they're doing and how they're preparing, without having to exploit too much. But still, it's kind of like a come together. He does it with his wife, and they're able to talk about life, and he also happens to be a Niner player. You know what I mean? Like, it's not central around it, but it is an aspect of that podcast. Whereas a guy like a Micah Parsons was on his podcast criticizing other teams, and I know it's natural. Obviously we're going to talk about what's going on in the NFL, but he's over here writing checks that his ass can't cash because you look back when we beat the Cowboys, and he was saying, best believe if we see them again, it's going to be different. Well, they got bounced in the first round when we were waiting for them. Instead, we had to face the guys that beat them. So I think it depends on how you approach it. What I will say, and I feel like it's a similarity with social media, and this is why I give credit to LeBron James. He has his social media, but when the playoff starts, he deactivates it and he locks in, and I like that You can have it during the regular season and use it sporadically because it's human nature. Obviously, we want to connect with people outside. But when it's the playoffs, now we're locked in. Now you have to adjust.
Yep.
And that's, again, I'll speak as a Niner fan. That's what Fred Warner did. Fred Warner has his podcast with his wife. His last episode was of the last, week of the regular season. And now going forward, they're pausing. They're taking a break from it, which I think is the way to go.
Exactly. You hit it. I couldn't have said it any better. And to your point, Travis Kelce does talk about other players in the league, which I think, man, you gotta focus on yourself. You gotta focus on your team. You can't be, an athlete going over other athletes and still say that you're focused on the game, because you're focused on their game and you're not necessarily playing them. You gotta play your game. And I feel like that probably happened to Jason Kelce. I know the Eagles fell apart collectively, but it didn't help that he had his podcast. So I mean, focus. If you guys are losing to the Cardinals, the podcast got to go on a Fred Warner pause, a Fred Warner hiatus. Let's call these athlete podcast pauses a Fred Warner hiatus. You need to go on a hiatus. You just lost to the Redbirds. I mean, man, you gotta do something different. If something keeps happening, you guys keep losing towards the end, you're the problem. You know what I mean? So it's very interesting. Draymond Green calls it the new media.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not liking the new media. I don't like that the players are having these podcasts and, especially in the postseason. Postseason, come on, man. Shut it off and lock in for 4 weeks, because essentially the playoffs is like 4 weeks, a month or so.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for 1 month, you can't, not go on a microphone and talk about other things that don't pertain to what you're, doing. I think you need to have a mind that's just solely on winning, locked in on winning in your game plan and your practices and diet and resting. I imagine their podcast takes a lot of time, a lot of editing, a lot of just a lot of scripting. You know what I mean? So it takes a lot. I mean, like, we put a lot, you put a lot into this podcast. I can imagine, what they put in theirs as well. So, I mean, you can only do so much, and I think you should be focused on the task at hand, which is playing football.
Yeah, no, and I think that's 100% right. And I'm glad that we hit that note as we close the episode on this whole new media, because I like the fact that they're able to open up and have this kind of connection with the fans. We as consumers like to get behind the scenes and know what's going through the thoughts of the athletes, of these competitors throughout the course of a season. But if I'm in their position, I'm trying to be responsible not only for my own sake, but to the team's sake, because ultimately the goal is to win. And if you see that this might be taking away from the team's productivity, like you said, maybe it's time to take a hiatus, to take a step back. And if you want to use it for other reasons, like I mentioned, like Fred Warner, his wife, do it, and talk about other things outside of the season, I can respect that. But like you said, is it taking away from my productivity? Is it taking away from my livelihood? Because ultimately, it's like, which one am I want to do? Which one do I want to do? There's money to be made with the new medium, but at the same time, if I'm an all-pro linebacker for a perennial playoff team, that has a shelf life. You look at other stars who have stepped away from the leagues or stepped away from sports, you only have a certain amount of time at your peak in the NFL, in the NBA. That's why you see guys, when they retire, then they go through that media, then they become a member of the new media, as Draymond likes to say,
Yeah, and I like that. I agree with that, man. That's an excellent take, because definitely you only have so much time to be great, everyone. So when you go to work this week and you're listening to the J Area podcast, just know that that day could be your last, and it could be your best day or worst day, but you only have that moment to make the most of what happens every day. So you got to go out there, be your best, live your best, do your best. That's all you can do.
100%. I look forward to see how the NFC and AFC championships roll out. Hopefully, the Niners will still be alive. I have my faith in them. I look forward to talking about that with you, Dan. Thank you again for joining me on the J Area Podcast.
Thank you for having me, man.
All right, we look forward to next week. We'll see you guys then. This has been the J Area Podcast.
Peace out, everyone.